AI generated her children's faces onto a corn video. Lindsay Hendricks went on the Wild Chaos podcast to open up about her PDF ex-husband, Kenneth Ray Dial Jr. Kenneth started off by playing a game with Lindsay's 7-year-old daughter called Guess the Food on My Finger. Kenneth would blindfold this little girl and then make her lick different foods off of his finger so that she could guess what it was. Eventually, instead of his fingers, he was putting his genitals up to her mouth. While Lindsay was at work, Kenneth would constantly SA Lindsay's daughter. This abuse went on for years. Kenneth would use photos of Lindsay's children and AI generate their faces onto naked women. Kenneth also AI generated the children's faces onto a corn video.
This is your ex-husband.
So he would take pictures like off my social media or their social media and then AI generate their faces over a woman's naked body, maybe a video. Unfortunately, he still had a video from when him and I were married. And he AI generated my oldest daughter's face over mine.
During a video of you two, of an intimate video.
Yep.
Kenneth was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. What a disgusting man, and I am so relieved that he is locked up for the rest of his life. What do you guys think about this case?
Police truly believe that this 86-year-old woman had lit herself on fire, stabbed herself, and robbed herself. On the morning of January 13th of 2013, the body of 86-year-old Una Crown was found by her niece's husband. She was face down in a pool of blood surrounded by burnt remains of newspapers. Police were called, and once they arrived at the scene, they didn't think that Una's death was suspicious. Their theory was that somehow Una had set herself on fire and the cuts on her neck were from her scarf when she fell down. Luckily, an autopsy was done and it revealed something way different. It was revealed that Una had been stabbed in the neck and the chest repeatedly and then set on fire. She also had some injuries to her hands, which revealed she was probably putting up a fight with her killer. As pathologists were looking at her wounds, they could tell it was from a long-bladed knife, and she didn't have that in her home, so that's when they came with the conclusion that the killer brought it with them and left with it. Now investigators needed to figure out who could have done this to this 86-year-old woman. They only took her wedding ring and about $50 in cash. Since police didn't think that Una's death was suspicious or even took her case seriously, so many people had been in and out of her home cleaning the floors that if there was any evidence, it would be gone. Crime Watch had featured Una's case to hopefully find who was responsible for this, but it always led them to a dead end. In 2023, thanks to advancements in DNA research, they linked a suspect to the crime and he is currently in trial.
She sold a 12-year-old girl for $100 and some drugs. 41-year-old Julia Costa was a trusted adult who was taking care of a 12-year-old girl and her siblings. Julie brought the kids to a hotel by the airport. She handed off the 12-year-old little girl to a man named Joshua Martell. In exchange for the little girl, she got 2 little bags of drugs and $100. Joshua brought the girl to a room in the hotel. When he got inside, he physically assaulted her and then brutally SA'd her. When she tried to escape, he blocked off the exit. A month after assaulting this 12-year-old girl, Joshua was found at the same hotel assaulting a 13-year-old girl he kidnapped from school. Julie was caught and sent to jail to await her trial. While she was waiting, she took her inmate's iPad and messaged the 12-year-old girl, asking her to retract her statement and act as if nothing happened. Julie even called the girl multiple times, trying to intimidate her. Joshua was only sentenced to 21 to 50 years in prison. As of right now, Julie has been convicted but not yet sentenced. It is so disgusting to me that there are people out there who will do anything for their own benefit, including hurting a child. What do you guys think of this case?
He admitted that he punched his 8-year-old daughter until she stopped responding. But that wasn't even the worst part. On August 2nd, 2025, police were called to a La Quinta Inn in Bakersfield, California for an unconscious child. But when they got there, this wasn't a medical emergency. It was a crime scene. Inside a locked bathroom, 8-year-old Genesis Mata was found dead inside a bathtub. And almost immediately, it was clear that this didn't happen in a single moment. Genesis had been suffering for days. Her body showed severe burns, consistent with boiling water being poured on her. There were deep marks and scarring from being beaten with wires and hangers. Some of her fingernails were missing, and internally, she had suffered serious abdominal trauma. Her father, Ray Mata Jr., admitted that he punched her in the stomach until she stopped responding. But that moment wasn't sudden, and it wasn't his first time hurting her. By the time that happened, Genesis had already been enduring escalating abuse. This wasn't something that happened quietly or all at once. The signs were there, and they were getting worse. And that's what makes this case so hard to sit with. People saw it happening. Family members say that CPS had been contacted around 20 times. School staff noticed the injuries. There were absences, warning signs, and obvious proof that something was wrong. At one point, there was even an active investigation into the home. And still, nothing stopped it. Instead, in the days leading up to her death, investigators believe her father and stepmother moved the family into a motel, possibly to hide what was happening. Genesis was kept out of sight, while the abuse continued behind a closed door. Even after she died, there was a delay before anyone called for help. Now both Ray Mata Jr. and Graciela Bustamante are now facing charges including first-degree murder, torture, and child cruelty. If convicted, they could face the death penalty. Their trials are expected to begin in March of 2026. But this case isn't just about what they did. It's about everything that led up to it, and all of the chances where this could have been stopped. What do you guys think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
They lay down to spell out the word help. This was a literal living nightmare. They were sloshing round in human excrement. They could not escape. This kept going from bad to horrific. It was the 7th of February 2013 when cruise ship the Carnival Triumph set off from Galveston, Texas. Over 4,000 passengers were on board for what was intended to be a 4-day cruise to Mexico and back. These people were buzzing for some relaxation time, fun, and a chance to catch some rays and switch off from the outside world. And switch off from the outside world, they really did. On the 3rd day of the cruise, passengers were woken up at 5:30 a.m. by a shrill alarm. And this would have absolutely frightened the life out of me. I'd have been like, okay, was nice knowing you, we're going down, bye. Guests soon found out the cause of the alarm was a fire on board. Now, this was resolved actually fairly promptly, and the passengers thought everything was going to be okay. The fire was put out. However, the ripple effect was devastating. The fire caused a total power outage for the entire ship, meaning not only could the ship actually not move, go anywhere, there were no lights, there were no cooking facilities, and maybe most concerningly, there was no flushing toilets. This was actually the 4th engine room fire on a Carnival-owned ship, resulting in a loss of power since 1999. It had happened 4 times. But I doubt any of these passengers were aware of this when they booked the trip. Pretty soon, the passengers were made aware of the lack of proper toileting facilities now the power was out, and they were advised to poop in these red bags that were handed out. People were kind of like, no, and just continued to poo in the unflushable toilets, which after days stranded at sea caused quite the backlog, pardon the pun. One person even described what they saw in the toilet as a poo lasagna. Sorry if anybody's eating right now. And speaking of food, supplies got drastically limited due to the fact that any perishable items had to be thrown away because guess what? The fridges weren't working because they couldn't turn them on. There was obviously also no cooking facilities, which meant the passengers were left with largely just cold sandwiches to eat. And it was very COVID-esque, with people being pretty selfish about supplies. They were trying to stockpile whatever they could. So the people in charge decided to essentially organize tugboats to come and drag the ship back to shore. But when they did this, the movement coupled with the overflowing toilets caused sewage to leak everywhere. It was absolutely foul. Urine and feces were sloshing around people's ankles, and they were forced to take mattresses up to the top deck if they wanted to sleep in a poop-free zone, basically. There was also obviously no aircon, so people had to spread out their bed sheets in order to just get some shade up there. The goal was to reach land by the early afternoon of Valentine's Day, but one of the tow lines actually broke, prolonging the passengers' suffering. Why did they not just poop in the bags? The staff had even offered, like, if you just leave these bags outside of your room, we'll deal with it, we'll take care of it. The ship finally docked after 9 p.m. and you'd probably be thinking that the passengers would get some kind of huge payout after that ordeal, but no, they just got a refund. They did get $500 and a complimentary cruise though. The operators of the ship said, quote, "We are proud of the fact that since 2013, over 53 million guests have enjoyed safe and memorable vacations with us, and we will continue to operate to these high standards." The actual poop cruise ship is still in operation today, and you cannot convince me that they managed to clean every single scrap of feces out of every nook and cranny on that ship.
She sent photos of herself farting to her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend and actually got in trouble for it. 25-year-old Rhiannon Evans from North Wales did something that many would think would be embarrassing. She sent a series of farting videos to her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend Deborah. Now, Rhiannon didn't just send one video or 2 videos, she sent 7 videos of herself farting over several days. In one of the videos, Rhiannon places the camera on her bottom, she lets it rip and smiles throughout the whole video. When Deborah received these videos, she was not amused. Deborah stated when she got these videos, she felt distress and anxiety and felt like she wasn't safe in her own home. However, Rhiannon claimed that she sent these videos in the first place because she felt like her partner was being treated unfairly due to a child custody dispute with Deborah. Prosecutors argued that Rhiannon's actions were purely malicious and that she found the whole situation funny. However, Rhiannon's defense lawyer stated that she was drinking during the time of those videos and she wasn't thinking about the consequences. As a result, Rhiannon had to complete 15 rehab sessions, undergo 60 days of alcohol abstinence monitoring, and pay Deborah about $120. She was also given a 2-year restraining order and was banned from contacting Deborah.
Peter Tobin was a Scottish serial killer and serial sex offender who murdered at least 3 women over the space of 15 years. He spent his time using hundreds of fake names, fake aliases, and moved constantly throughout the country, and he was only caught when his final victim was found under the floorboards of a church. This is how the truth about what this man done came out, starting from the very last murder and working backwards through his life. I have actually filmed a full in-depth podcast about this, about Peter Tobin's life and everything that happened, so if you do enjoy a deeper dive, then please find my podcast up here and in my bio. That will be coming out either Thursday or Friday this week. Peter Britton Tobin was born on the 27th of August 1946 in Johnson in Renfrewshire in Scotland. He had a very large family and they were quite a poor working class family. He was the youngest sibling of around 8 children. By the time that he was arrested in 2006, he had a long criminal history, mainly geared towards sexual violence and just violence in general towards women and young girls. The main crime that he was already known for was back in 1993 when he had been jailed for 14 years for drugging and sexually assaulting 2 14-year-old girls in his flat in Hampshire. He served only 10 years of that sentence and he was released back into the public. After that, he lived under multiple aliases and moved around the UK without proper monitoring. Usually when someone is on the sex offenders list, they will be constantly watched by the police. They have to report where they're going, where they're living, and if they're moving somewhere, and for some reason in this case, he just completely slipped under the radar. In 2006, when his last victim was found, Peter Tobin was working as an odd job kind of handyman for a church called St Patrick's Church in Anderston in Glasgow under the name / fake alias Pat McLaughlin. On the 24th of September 2006, 23-year-old Polish student Angelika Kluk was cleaning the church which she done for work. She had seen Tobin that day and he decided he was going to rape her, beat her, and repeatedly stab her to death. He then hid her body under the floorboards inside the church where they both worked. Angelika was reported missing pretty quickly and the police began their investigation. They quickly identified though that the handyman who worked alongside her, Pat McLaughlin, had vanished at the same time as her, which honestly instantly raised their suspicions. They done a huge public appeal and they put this man's face everywhere. It was then that they realised his name was not Pat McLaughlin. It was Peter Tobin, a known sex offender who should have never been working in that church under a false name. He was then arrested on the 1st of October of 2006. In May of 2007, he was convicted of the murder and rape of Angelica Kluck and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 21 years. It seemed a bit strange to investigators though. Why would a man of this age suddenly commit this crime out of nowhere? They kind of got thinking, what if he has done this before? While these investigations were going on, the police launched a major review called Operation Anagram, basically going backwards in time to check Peter Tobin's movements against any missing persons cases or murders of young girls across the UK, linking him to any that could be found at that time. Once Tobin was in custody, police began their investigation into his past. They looked at every address he had lived at and tried to come up with every name that he had used over the years. That investigation led them to a house in Margate in Kent. Tobin had lived there in the early 1990s, and under the garden in that house, they found the remains of 2 young women who had been missing for 15 years. The first body that was found was a missing girl, 15-year-old Vicky Hamilton. On the 10th of February 1991, she had said goodbye to her sister. She was staying with her at the weekend at a town called Livingston in Scotland. She was from Falkirk, so she had to change bus stops in Bathgate in order to get back home that night, but she never made it home. She was seen eating fish and chips at the bus stop in Bathgate, but she never made it back to Falkirk. It was shown in the investigation that Peter Tobin had raped her and murdered her. He then cut her body into multiple pieces, wrapped it and drove hundreds of miles south, and then just moved to Margate. I am from Bathgate originally, and I remember this case so well. I remember seeing it on the news, and I remember when this all came out and when it happened. I honestly can recall it like it was yesterday. The second body that was found in that garden at that house was an 18-year-old student named Dinah McNichol. In early August of 1991, she was hitchhiking home from a music festival that she had attended in Hampshire. She absolutely loved music, and this was probably one of the best weekends of her life that honestly ended in the most tragic and horrific way possible. Dinah McNichol accepted a lift off what would later be revealed as Peter Tobin. She was in the car with a boy. The boy got out first and the driver continued with Dinah, and she was never seen ever again. It was then found out that Peter Tobin had raped and murdered her too, and her body was also found at that property in Margate. Some detectives and journalists, and honestly me as well, I believe he has killed so many other people that we are not aware of. It could potentially be workers, it could be people that have just slipped under the radar that have potentially had a hard life, but I do not believe for 1 second that this man has only killed 3 people. Even Tobin himself has made claims that the number is far higher and that he has killed more people. He has never gave any solid details and has never been charged with any further murders. There has been huge speculation over the years that Peter Tobin was the unsolved serial killer in Glasgow in the 1960s named Bible John. I have covered this case previously on my channel, but no proof has ever been found that it was him. I just think with the way in which he killed these girls compared to the Bible John murders is very different. I honestly as well sometimes feel like the Bible John murders, one was killed and then the others were copycat murders. This is something I'm going to go into detail in my podcast about as well, because I'm going to do a Bible John episode, so if you want to see that then follow along. In December of 2008, Tobin was convicted of Vicky Hamilton's murder, and in December of 2009 he was convicted of the murder of Dinah McNichol too. His sentence was then upgraded to a whole life order, meaning he would spend the rest of his life rotting away in prison like he deserved. Tobin would spend the whole rest of his life at HM Prison Edinburgh, and he was diagnosed as a psychopath by a senior psychologist after his 3rd conviction. In September of 2022, he actually had a fall in his cell and broke his leg. He was already suffering from a range of other health conditions, which karma, including dementia, vascular disease and prostate cancer. He developed pneumonia and died in hospital on the 8th of October 2022, aged just 76. Peter Tobin was only exposed for what he done because of Angelica Kluck's murder. From that one crime, investigators worked backwards and fully gave answers to the families of Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol after 15 years of agonising searches. He died though without accounting or taking accountability for anything else that he may have done. If any information ever comes out, I will do an updated video on this, but these are the confirmed killings. I've said it before in this video and I've said it again, it's something I've said for as long as I can remember, that I wholeheartedly believe this man had so many more victims. I have went into detail in my podcast about the abuse that his 3 wives that he had in his life suffered, and honestly, it makes you sick to your stomach. Like, I can't even put into words how disgusting and vile this man is. Peter Tobin was just a violent, disgusting disgrace of a human being. And honestly, I am so glad that he got caught for what he done, so at least a little bit of justice was served. But to be honest, I don't think it was enough. I just wanted to say rest in peace to Angelica, Dinah and Vicky, because they did not deserve to go in the way that they did. They were literally just young girls living their life. In the podcast episode I have done about this, which is going to go up either Wednesday or Friday this week, I go into a lot more detail about his first wife, his second wife and also his third wife, and the abuse that they endured. Also a little bit more about his background, his childhood and where he grew up. So if you would like to hear that, then please follow along to my podcast. Thank you all so much for being here and listening along. If you have any other case suggestions, please pop them down below in the comments or give me a message. Look after yourself and I will see you in the next one.
The cannibal frat boy. He was a normal teen until one day he did the unthinkable. It was Florida, 2016. Austin Harriff was 19 years old. He was a sophomore in college. He was in a frat. He was an athlete. By all accounts, just a very normal fraternity bro. Until like June, July 2016, when Austin's friends and family started to realize that he wasn't acting the same. He was acting really, really strange and having these really, really extreme mood swings. Austin said that around this time he was hearing voices and felt like evil forces were following him. Austin was also making some really concerning Google searches at this time. Things like, am I crazy? How to know if you're going crazy? Hearing voices in my sleep? Hallucinations and schizophrenia, just to name a few. At this time, Austin was very paranoid about demons. He felt like he might be Jesus or possibly a half-human, half-dog hybrid. His little sister would lock her door at night because she was afraid of him. Within a month or two of Austin's behavior changing, everyone's lives would change forever. Austin's friends and family said that they were very concerned about Austin, but no one seriously intervened and got him help, which takes us to the tragic events of August 15th, 2016. People that saw Austin that day said that he was acting weird. Later that evening, he went to a restaurant with his dad, sister, and some other people, but before the food ever even got to the table, Austin got up to use the bathroom and just left the restaurant without telling anyone. Austin walked 2 miles to his mother's house, but his mother had already gotten a call from her other child saying, hey, we were all at a restaurant and Austin has disappeared. Do you know where Austin is? His mother drove Austin back to the restaurant. She said that the time they spent together, Austin was acting really weird. He was saying really weird things, and he even tried to drink cooking oil while in her home. Back at the restaurant, Austin's dad was pretty much fed up with Austin. His son has been acting weird all summer, and now they've tried to go out to dinner and have a nice evening, and his son just got up and left without telling anyone. So Austin and his dad got into an altercation, which led to Austin getting up and leaving the restaurant once again. This time, Austin is walking in the direction of his father's house. He said while he was walking, he was hearing voices. Demons were following him, and he even saw something that resembled the Grim Reaper. So now Austin is terrified and he's running. He runs right up to what he said looked like a white light, thinking that this might be a safe space for him. But when he got to the white light, he saw a witch, and then the witch started to scream. So Austin began to attack the witch. The white light that Austin saw and ran up to was actually the garage light of the home of Michelle and John Stevens. They had this really cool garage that they set up really cool with couches and stuff, and most evenings they would entertain or just relax in that garage with the garage door open, and tragically that's what Michelle and John Stevens did that evening. The witch that Austin attacked and was now stabbing repeatedly was Michelle. Her husband John heard his wife's screams and tried to go and help her, but Austin began to attack and stab him as well. A neighbor that lived across the street also heard what was going on and tried to go and help his neighbors. Austin also stabbed that neighbor, but that neighbor thankfully was able to get away, survive, and call 911 for help.
Please, and medical. Young man beating up a woman across the street.
Are either of them injured? Can you tell from where you are?
Yes, there's a girl laying on the ground. He beat her up. I ran over there. I'm bleeding profusely here at the moment.
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Can you tell if she's conscious?
No, it does not appear so, no.
Strangely enough, at the exact same time, Austin's mom called 911 to report her son missing.
I don't know how to do this. My son, he's taken off. It seems like he's a little delusional. Says, you know, he feels immortal and like a superhero. So I don't know what's going on with him. And he was out to dinner with his dad today and he took off.
He left on foot?
Yes. He has no ID on him, no phone. We'll say, I think the only thing he has on him is a pocket knife switchblade.
When police got to the scene, it was a brutal sight. Tragically, Michelle and John had already passed away, and Austin was on top of John like an animal. He was growling and eating John's face and chest. The police at the scene said that Austin was having somewhat superhuman strength, that it took 4 police officers, a taser, and a police dog to get Austin off of John. He said that he seemed unfazed while he was being tased and while the canine was like ripping out his arm. To the surprise of many, there was not a single illegal substance found in Austin's system other than a small trace amount of plant, which honestly blew everyone's mind in the media, the police officers, because everyone was convinced that Austin had to be tweaking out on some pretty gnarly substances. Multiple psychiatrists examined Austin and all of them said that he was experiencing a psychotic break. Which, yeah, I 100% believe that. If everything Austin said he was experiencing is true, I think it's really sad that no one intervened in his life before this. I think, in my personal opinion, that this was 100% preventable if someone had gotten him professional mental help. 2022, Austin Harif was found not guilty by reason of insanity for killing John and Michelle Stevens. A ruling that to say was upsetting for the loved ones of John and Michelle would be an understatement.
You are a disgusting human with a rancid soul, a sick animal that should have been put down a long time ago. You deserve nothing more than to feel despair and debilitating guilt for what you did every second of the day for the rest of your sad, meaningless, and pathetic life. I hope death comes for you sooner than later, and when it does, I will rejoice, because only then will justice be truly served for John and Michelle.
Thank you.
I hope you burn in hell, along with your parents. Wade, you're disgusting.
And I completely understand how they're feeling. A lot of victims' families feel some kind of comfort or closure knowing that their loved one's killer was brought to justice, and that's something that they're never going to be able to experience. I couldn't even imagine someone I love being brutally killed and you knowing who did it, but still hearing that not guilty verdict. I don't know how I would handle that, and I don't know how I would be able to ever cope with that. So I 100% understand their anger. This is so upsetting because there were so many red flags that the situation with Austin was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. If you watched to the end of this video, thank you so much. And to the loved ones of Michelle and John, I am so sorry and I sympathize with you so much, and don't let anyone tell you that you don't have a right to be angry. If you watched to the end and listened to John and Michelle's story, thank you so much. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
What happens when the scariest film on Netflix that only 13% of viewers can actually finish is based on a true story? The only right answer is you obviously finish the movie no matter how scary it is, and then you look into the real case. I'm talking about the 2017 Spanish horror movie Veronica, which is labeled the scariest movie on Netflix. So I was one of the 13% that actually finished the movie, but let me just say it was incredibly scary. Like nightmare fuel, make you scared to fall asleep type scary. But I recently found out that this story wasn't just made up. It was based on the real case of Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro. She mysteriously died in 1991 after a seance in which she played with a Ouija board. She lived for only 6 months after playing with the Ouija board, and what she experienced in that time frame is bone-chilling. Some people believe her, some are still skeptical. So let's talk about it, and you can decide for yourself. The movie Veronica follows a teenager named Veronica and her 2 friends, and it takes place in 1991 Madrid. In the film, Veronica's dad has died, and one of her friend's boyfriends has also passed away. So what do? All 3 of them play with a Ouija board at school. You know, the only logical answer. But after this, Veronica ends up possessed by a demonic entity that is hell-bent on torturing her and those closest to her. This movie was a slow burn, but it genuinely freaked me out. The director, Paco Plaza, got his inspiration from the real possession of Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro. And surprisingly, the movie is pretty similar to what she actually experienced. And let me just start off by saying, even if you don't believe in stuff like this is the only case in Spain where a police officer actually investigated. And then he sat down and wrote in his police report that he 100% witnessed paranormal phenomena. So do with that information as you will. Anyways, this is Estefania. She was only 18 years old when she suddenly and very mysteriously died in 1991. She lived in the Vallecas neighborhood of Spain, and by all accounts, her life was pretty normal. Estefania had lots of friends and 5 siblings, so she was always surrounded by lots of people. In 1990, her estranged grandfather was on his deathbed. Now, her grandpa hated his family, but he whispered his last words ever to Estefania, and some people think this is where her haunting began. He told her, quote, "If I cannot harm you in this life, I will do it in the next one." End quote. Estefania and her siblings really didn't want to go and see him, but her parents thought that it was the right thing to do. Fast forward a few months later. This is when one of Estefania's closest friend's boyfriends passed away suddenly in a motorcycle accident. It was very tragic and hard to process for everyone inside that friend group, but Estefania had an idea. She thought that if she got a Ouija board, maybe they could all have a seance and try to contact her friend's late boyfriend. So they did. But almost immediately, things went horribly wrong. They held the seance at their school, so it was Estefania and her 2 closest friends, and according to them, unsettling and unexplained things happened right off the bat. The glass pointer on the Ouija board began to spin around untouched on the board until it eventually shattered to pieces. They never got the chance to contact her friend's late boyfriend because, out of nowhere, the Ouija board started emitting this unnatural smoke, even though it wasn't on fire. Estefania was the only one who sat too close and accidentally inhaled some of this strange smoke, and after this, nothing would ever be the same. A nun at the school ended up catching them and broke the board, but it didn't take long for everyone to notice something strange about Estefania. She would start having violent convulsions where her whole body went rigid, and her eyes would either go completely black or completely white. During these episodes, she would foam at the mouth. She also began experiencing terrifying visions of dark figures roaming her bedroom and almost controlling her. She would randomly attack her family members or bark at them, and then she would black out and have no memory of what just took place. She said these dark shadows would torment her. She could no longer sleep at night, and if she did, she would wake up standing completely upright, scratching the walls. It got so bad that her fingers were bloody. Estefania declined very quickly over the next 6 months, both physically and mentally, and it really scared her family. They had no idea how to help her, so they started by having a doctor examine her. All of her symptoms could be connected to epilepsy, but multiple doctors examined her, and none of them found any underlying physical or cognitive condition. She was never even diagnosed with epilepsy. When doctors couldn't help her, the family turned to priests, but they couldn't help either. One of the very last things that she ever said was that the demons were begging her to come with them. And sadly, just 6 months after the seance and playing with the Ouija board, Estefania mysteriously died. Her autopsy report only stated cardiac arrest as her cause of death, and outside of that, the medical report said, quote, "sudden and suspicious death." End quote. You'd think that would be the end of the story, But no, it doesn't end there. For over a year after Estefania died, her family would continue to be haunted. The house itself became a hotspot for paranormal activity, and somehow it progressed even worse. The family would constantly hear someone scream and laugh in the home, and on several occasions, they would open Estefania's bedroom door, only to find it destroyed. All of her belongings were strewn all over the place. All of the doors and windows in the house would open and slam shut on their own, and deep scratches would mysteriously appear all over the walls. Every single family member saw a black figure crawling around their house in an unnatural way. Furniture was destroyed, appliances would go on and off, and I think one of the scariest things they experienced was a photo of Estefania mysteriously falling off the wall. When they went to pick it up, they found that the picture itself had been burned, while the picture frame was completely intact and undamaged. Every crucifix they had in the house would flip upside down without anyone touching it. The events eventually got so bad that the family actually called the police because they didn't know what else to do. 4 officers came out to the home, and to their surprise, they found the entire family huddled together outside. This made the hair on the back of their necks stand up because it was in the dead of night and it was freezing outside, and one of them even had a newborn with them. So for them to be standing outside like that, they must have been really scared. When the officers went inside, they said they immediately felt like something was seriously wrong. They heard loud banging in the house, even though they were the only ones inside. And while they were looking at a wardrobe, the doors started violently opening and closing right in front of them when no one was touching it. The officers also found this unexplained brown residue on a nightstand that appeared right before their eyes, which some have later said was ectoplasm. Before long, 2 of the officers went back outside and refused to come back in, leaving only 2 of them to continue investigating. The remaining officers noticed cold spots all over the house and occasionally the smell of rotten meat. After their investigation, the police officers left, unable to help this family. But the craziest part is that when the lead officer went back to the station to file his incident report, he actually wrote that he 100% witnessed paranormal phenomena. I think that's the most insane thing about this case. This possession is the only police report in Spain that recorded paranormal events. So whether or not you believe in the paranormal, I just wanted to point this out because I think it's so rare to have actual police officers back people up in cases like this. Eventually, the family couldn't take living here any longer, and they eventually sold their house. What's odd though is that the new owners never heard or experienced anything paranormal after the family left. So this leads me to question, was it really the house that was haunted, or was it the family? I know a lot of people say that her death was due to an undiagnosed medical condition, which if I'm being honest, I can see that being true. But it is super weird to me that all of this only started happening after she played with the Ouija board. I don't know. What do you guys think? Was she really possessed, or was something else at play? Nonetheless, it inspired this movie. Have you guys seen it? Because it scared the crap out of me the first time I watched it. I think it scared me because it did a good job instilling me with dread and anxiety. But I'm also just a chicken when it comes to possession movies. It scored 86% on Rotten Tomatoes though, which is pretty good. I think any film that says based on a true story at the beginning can be terrifying, but it hits different when you know that it actually was.
Sorry, she went missing but then reappeared 9 days later in her own bed. This is like the Mexican version of the JonBenet Ramsey case. It's one of the most confusing crime cases ever, so if you want to save yourself the agony of being totally confused and dumbfounded by this case, then just keep scrolling. Paulette Guevara Farah was the sweetest little 4-year-old girl. She was living near Mexico City with her family, her mum, dad, and her older sister. Paulette had some kind of developmental difficulties, but I struggled to find an actual diagnosis of any kind for her, but essentially I believe she was developmentally younger than her actual age. And the family weren't poor. They were able to afford nannies to help out in the house and help with the little girl's needs, which was particularly helpful because of her disability. On the evening of the 21st of March 2010, Paulette, her older sister, and her dad came home from a trip they'd been on. They returned to their apartment that night, and the mum of the little girls stayed up to do their bedtime routine, and then the whole family apparently went to sleep. The next morning, the alarm was raised. The dad had already gone to work by this point. One of the nannies went into Paulette's room to try and wake her up, only to find she'd completely vanished. Now, obviously really panicked, the nanny looked everywhere and raised the alarm to another nanny that they had there at the time, and the pair searched together, but absolutely no sign of this little girl. There was strangely also no sign of forced entry, no break-in, nothing was taken, there was no kind of like robbery that had happened here. Nobody could make sense of this at all. I've also heard that there was CCTV in the apartment block. There's a couple of sources that say there was CCTV and it showed nobody entering or leaving that night. Police brought in cadaver dogs to search the whole apartment, but again, nothing was found. It was so incredibly weird. There was no logical explanation as to where this little girl had gone, and also no explanation to how weird her parents were acting. Many people during the search just said that they felt that the parents weren't really looking very hard at all. Their stories also didn't seem to make sense. They kept kind of chopping and changing their story. And the mum casually mentioned in one interview, she referred to it as being a kidnapping for ransom, like the John Bonet case, but how incredibly weird, because there was no evidence to suggest this is what had happened at all. There was obviously no note, and a key part of a kidnapping for ransom case is that the kidnapper wants the ransom money. Nobody had left any kind of contact details or any way to give anybody any money. Her mum's demeanour was also just so casual for somebody whose daughter was missing. She even made jokes in one interview saying that maybe Harry Potter or aliens took her daughter. And bear in mind, by now, teams had scoured the apartment head to toe. Every inch of every room was turned upside down for clues, but nothing. And interestingly, in one interview, the mum and the interviewer were even sat on the little girl's bed and nothing was found. Then 9 days later, on the 31st of March, a horrific discovery was made. Search teams had again come into the property to do some more digging when they noticed a smell. And this was a smell that they'd never smelled anything like in this apartment before. Suddenly they could just tell something was definitely not right. And on entering Paulette's bedroom, they found something horrifying. Edged into a space at the foot of the bed, between kind of the foot of the bed and the mattress, wrapped in bed sheets, was little Paulette's body. And there's talk of, in leaked video footage, investigators could be heard saying she was severely beaten. However, very quickly that narrative changed. It was deemed that Paulette had kind of rolled herself down the bed, accidentally got wedged there and suffocated essentially, and remained there the entire time. Throughout all of these investigations, throughout all of these searches, the dogs being there, everything. In my opinion, this is a total lie. There is no way that she had been there the whole time while a whole TV crew was there doing an investigative interview in the bedroom. No way. The mum and dad kind of turned on each other. The dad was very much casting suspicion on the mum, and many people also felt the dad could have swayed the investigation due to him being pretty powerful and having connections allegedly with high-ranking officials. Some people believe that the parents may have just wanted to get rid of Paulette because of her special needs, basically, which is absolutely horrific. And as perplexing and unbelievable as this case is, Paulette's death was ruled an accident.
How can a grown man go into a public toilet in a very busy place, vanish into thin air and never be seen ever again? This case even led to his parents being arrested in connection with his disappearance, and it has baffled investigators and followers of this case for years. This is the disappearance of Stephen Clark. Stephen was born on the 30th of August 1969 in Colchester in Essex, and when he was around 2 years old, he was living in Edinburgh, and it was there that he was actually hit by a lorry. This accident left him in a coma and with permanent injuries. For the rest of his life, he had limited use of his left arm, a damaged leg, and he walked with a very pronounced limp. Throughout Stephen's life, his family moved around through different locations, and they spent about a decade in South Africa, where Stephen actually attended a special school. They returned to the UK in Guildford and then settled in Marske by the Sea in North Yorkshire in the summer of 1991. By 1992, Stephen was working at the Leonard Cheshire Home and also attending the Rathbone Society in Redcar, which supported people with disabilities and allowed them to socialise and meet people who were just like them. In Everybody who knew Stephen just described him as outgoing, adventurous, and just full of life, despite the physical challenges that he faced. He never really let them get him down. On Monday, the 28th of December 1992, just after Christmas celebrations, Stephen actually had a bit of a choice to make. His father had a ticket for a football match that afternoon, and Stephen had been said that he wanted to go with him. But his dad had actually been trying to get Stephen to understand money management. He told his son that if he wanted to go to the game, he had to pay for his own ticket. According to the family, it was actually a bit of a running joke within their little circle that Stephen did not like spending his own money. It was said that during Christmas, his dad had actually tried to have a serious conversation with him, saying that he couldn't continue to pay for things. In the end, shockingly, Stephen decided not to go to the match and not to pay for his own ticket. So his dad left and went for the football by himself. Instead of going to the football, he picked a free activity. Stephen went for a walk with his mother Doris along the seafront at Saltburn by the sea. It is really important to note in this case that this is a walk that him, his mum, and also all of his family had completed multiple times. They had done this walk so often they knew it like the back of their hand. Shortly after 3 p.m. that day, they reached the public toilets near the pier on the promenade. Stephen went into the men's toilets and his mum Doris went into the women's toilets. When she came out though, Stephen was nowhere to be seen. She waited for a while, but he never appeared. She assumed that he might have decided to walk home, so she herself decided to head back to the house. I am just going to interrupt a little bit here and say that I find this extremely strange. Whether it was my son or not, and whether they know the area or they've been at this place a million times, even if I was with somebody that I had maybe just met that night and I knew that they had went into the toilet by themselves and they hadn't came back out, I would be getting somebody of that gender to go into the toilet to ask if they can shout their name or to shout my name themselves. I really struggle to understand why his mum just left him there. Even though he was an independent boy, he still had his vulnerabilities, and I just can't fathom why she would do that, but moving on. After she decided to return to the house, Stephen wasn't there. When he still hadn't returned later on that evening, the family decided to report him missing. Him going into that toilet on the pier that day was the last confirmed sighting ever of Stephen Clark. There has been a lot of controversy surrounding this case, and over the years, some of the details in the parents' accounts of what happened that afternoon have varied slightly in different articles, different interviews, and different statements. For example, some articles are different as to how the walk began. There were some different versions where they left together, some versions where Doris left herself and Stephen caught up to her, but there's also variations on how long she waited outside the toilets. Early descriptions at the start of this case, she described a short wait of around a minute before deciding he must have headed home. In later interviews, she said she waited longer, around 15 to 20 minutes, and mentioned seeing 2 men and a little girl near the toilet. It is important to note though that the actual story itself has maintained the same over the years. It is just the small details that seem to have changed. But does that mean anything? No. It has been a long time. Things can change and they might just be shaken up by the whole experience, but I just thought that it was very important to mention. In the days that followed his disappearance, a few possible sightings were reported. One woman said she believed that she saw Stephen on the high street walking towards the Ship Inn in daylight, which is just like a normal pub where they would usually go. It's somewhere he'd frequented before, so it wouldn't be completely out of the realm of possibility that this could have been confused, or maybe she did see him. A couple of days later, a man reported seeing someone who looked like Stephen near the Clock roundabout in Redcar, walking alone in the town centre. Another sighting came on the 14th of January 1993 when a woman was looking out her window in Saltburn. She said that she saw somebody who she believed to be Stephen walking with an older man. He was described as in his 50s or 60s, bald with grey hair at the sides, medium build, wearing glasses. None of these sightings were ever confirmed to be Stephen, and extensive searches turned up absolutely nothing. There has been no body, no belongings, and no clear evidence as to what happened after he entered those toilets. It honestly just... I can't wrap my head around it. How could he go in a toilet and just disappear? One of the biggest and strangest developments in this case was in September of 1999, nearly 7 years after he disappeared. Cleveland police received an anonymous letter. It claimed that Stephen was dead and that his parents were responsible for it. The case was looked at again after this letter, but it didn't produce a breakthrough. Stephen remained missing, and year after year the family was still hoping for answers. Nothing more came of this after the letter, and they actually got the person to come forward who wrote it. They claimed that they didn't actually know Stephen or his family directly, but they claimed that they were just a concerned citizen. I find this very strange, and I don't understand why they would have done this, especially if they had absolutely no evidence. I can understand why the police didn't really do anything towards the parents either, because you can't just really go off of an anonymous tip. That was until, though, 2020. The Cleveland and North Yorkshire Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation. The detectives said that there was no proof that Stephen was still alive, and they had believed that he had came to serious harm. It was at this point that the police launched a murder inquiry, and in September of 2020, Stephen's parents, Doris, his mum, who was then 81, and Charles, his dad, who was then 78, were both arrested on the suspicion of his murder. I just think that is absolutely crazy. The police went ahead and searched their home and their garden, and they were later released without charge. The family later described this as, quote, extreme mental torture. After months of this, the parents were told that they were no longer under any investigation and no further action was ever taken against them. During this period in time, an ITV documentary called Accused of Murdering Our Son, the Stephen Clark story was filmed. That brought a lot more public attention to the case, but there's still not been any answers brought forward or any more tips bringing any information as to what really happened to Stephen that day. As of 2026, Stephen Clark has been missing for more than 33 years. He would now be in his mid-50s, and police have stated that they believe he is deceased. His family, including his sister, continue their appeals for information and say that they will never stop searching until they have answers. The Cleveland police have asked for anyone who knew Stephen at the time or who has any information, no matter how small, to come forward. If you're in the UK, you can contact the Cold Case team on 101. You can also call Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. I honestly just don't understand this case whatsoever. I hadn't actually heard about this happening at the time. I probably did, but I just didn't read too much into it. It was actually a podcast, The Missing, that highlighted this case. They have so many good coverages of cases, including family members and friends of those who have went missing. So if you are interested in especially missing persons cases, I have recommended this podcast so many times and I will continue to do so. I just don't understand how a young man with a disability can go into a public toilet on a busy December afternoon and just simply disappear. The fact that there's been no confirmed sightings, either no body or no clear motive for anybody to want to get rid of him, it's just given so much more questions than it ever will answer. I usually do give my theories at the end of these cases as to what I think happened or what the most likely scenario is, but honestly in this case I can't do so, because how can you just go missing from a toilet? I don't understand. Let me know what you think down below. If you do have any other cases you would like me to cover, please comment or message me. Thank you all so much for being here and listening. Look after yourself, and I will see you in the next one.
I just have a feeling that this goes so much deeper than we think, and the thought of that is making me feel sick. This is an ongoing case. Everything that I'm saying is alleged. Ugh, I just gave myself the ick. I'm also not a lawyer. I don't know anything. I'm a girl that has access to the internet. If I get anything wrong, just correct me in the comments and we can figure it out together. In late April of 2022, 16-year-old Tara and 17-year-old Gina, who both lived in Broward County, Florida, do not come home. Both girls are reported missing by their mothers. The next day at 1 in the morning, using the location from their phones, police are able to track the girls to a condo in Miami Beach. This place was an oceanfront condo where 69-year-old Dr. Jeffrey David Camlett lived. Jeffrey says he doesn't know where the girls are, and he quickly follows it up by saying, quote, "I haven't touched them." He's walking around his condo with the officers and he says, quote, "I don't know where they could have gone unless they're hiding in the closet or something." He goes to open up the hallway closet and the girls are hiding in the closet. He looks at them and says, "Why are you hiding?" and then tells the girls to come out and to tell the truth because they are in trouble. Dr. Camlett tells the officers that the girls were in there willingly. He claimed that he met them on Tinder, that they told him that they were 18 and confirmed that by showing him their IDs to prove it, and said that they wanted to stay the night with with him at his condo. And because Dr. Camlet in his own head is such a good guy, he wanted to help them. He says, quote, "I was trying to help them, trying to be the hero here." He then proceeds to ask the officer if he knows a specific retired sergeant, and he follows that by saying, "He's a good friend of mine. If you call him, he will tell you that I am a good guy." What Dr. Camlet failed to let officers know is that, first of all, he lied about not knowing that they were underage. The girls said they didn't show him any ID, and he didn't mention the reason why they were there is because he had offered Gina $600 to engage in certain adult activities with him in exchange for prescription substances. And this story about them connecting on Tinder is true. 17-year-old Gina had always been a rebellious girl. She lived in the suburbs of West Fort Lauderdale with her mother, who was a single working mother, and her 2 other siblings. Gina had trouble making friends in real life, so she turned to making friends online, which can be really scary, especially for a young girl, because you never know what people's intentions online are. And she did fall into hanging out with the wrong crowd. She started using substances a lot. She almost accidentally unalived herself from taking too much of said substances. She also had been in a psychiatric facility and a treatment facility, all by the time that she was 16. And although her mom pushed her to get better and do better and offered everything that she was able to give her daughter a good life, it's really sad, but sometimes you really can't help someone that does not want to be saved. And at that point in time, Gina did not want to be saved. But although Gina was often referred to as a troubled girl, she was still a mommy's girl. She was still little. She was young. She would call her mom for help still in the middle of the night when she felt scared, and her mom would do everything she could to make sure that her daughter never felt alone. Gina and Tara made that Tinder account together, which is where they started talking to Dr. Camlet. Gina agreed to go over there that night and texted Tara to meet them there. At the condo, after officers had found them, the girls were not talking. They were silent to most of the questions that were asked to them in front of Dr. Camlet. Later on, Dr. Camlet told the officers that the girls had asked him to move in with him and live with him, because according to him, the girls told him that they were living in a dangerous house filled with and a man that they were scared of. And he reiterated, did I say that word right? Reiterated to the police, quote, "Nothing's on here, by the way. I'm a doctor here on the beach, and I have pity for these kinds that tell me they are being held hostage and are on." And if you didn't catch that, yes, he referred to the girls as kinds. The girls, however, told officers that that was not true, that they never told him anything about living in a dangerous house with a dangerous man, because that wasn't true. They claimed that they were just fighting with their parents and they had ran away from home. Police ended up taking the 2 girls back to the police station. Their families were contacted and the girls were sent back home with their parents. Before we go any further, let's give a little background as to who this doctor is. Jeffrey David Camlet, once a husband and once a father, was also an analyst who specialized in withdrawal. He specialized in that because he had been an addict himself and he knew the struggles of it, and he quote unquote wanted to help people. In 2000, he opened up a practice in that, and he also had an additional wellness practice who had some of the most well-known people in Miami as his clients. Those included professional athletes, owners of professional sports teams, actors, actresses, etc. And that kind of gives you an idea of the social circle that he ran, and he attended the big events, the fancy parties, a lot of times with celebrities, famous people, or other people in power in other areas such as politics. However, he was suspicious, sketchy, just flat out questionable. For example, he said that he got his medical license from the State University of New York when he really got it from the University of Guadalajara in Mexico, which by the way is where I'm from. He said that he was a professor in the University of Miami, but the university has no record of him teaching there. A lot of times he also took payments, I'm talking hefty payments, like over $10,000 worth, in cash, claiming that it was because his clients were so famous that they wanted to have no paper trail, which could be true if he was giving them substances they shouldn't have, or amounts that would be dangerous for a human being to consume. Dr. Jeffrey Camlet was also no stranger to police. Police had been out to his condo many times. He had been arrested in 2008 and 2009. In 2011, police were called out to his condo because there was a 23-year-old college girl. Dr. Camlet told officers that night he'd been engaging in rough adult activities with this girl. He said that she fell off the bed, she fell into a glass table, and the broken glass severed her finger. When the cops got there that night, the girl was already gone. She had been taken by an ambulance, but Dr. Camlet told officers what happened, and then he handed them the girl's finger. Other police records of the police being called out to his condo are filed. Like, it says the police were called and they showed up, but the actual records themselves are blank. Like, what? I think also now is a good time to tell you that on paper, Dr. Jeffrey David Camlet seemed to have no prior arrest. His records had been wiped clean. So this guy literally has multiple mugshots, but no criminal record, which is so scary. Back to the case. We're at the police station after the girls were found in Dr. Camlet's apartment. When Tara's mother picked her up, she asked the officers if they had evaluated Tara for if they had given her kit, to which allegedly the officers told her no and suggested that if she wanted that done, she had to take Tara to get it done herself. 2 months pass. It's May of 2022. Tara's mother is extremely concerned and worried because she feels as if the police does not care about this case. She's really concerned, as she should be. She emails the state attorney's office an email with the subject, Jeffrey Epstein's situation in Miami-Dade County. In the email, she states that she thinks that Dr. Jeffrey Camlett, Mr. Good Guy, is not such a good guy. She believes that he has been paying young, vulnerable girls to engage in adult activities with him, bribing them with prescription drugs and cash. That was on May 22nd, her expressing her very real concerns to the state attorney's office. The very next day, May 23rd, Miami Beach police closes the case without any arrest or any further questioning because, quote, no allegations of criminal activity was made by either party at the scene, end quote. Then in June, I guess it's reopened, or at least being looked at again, because an investigator from the state attorney's human task force, Francisco Casanovas, is assigned to the case. Casanovas begins his investigation, and part of that includes questioning and talking to Gina and Tara. Casanovas interviews 16-year-old Tara, who allegedly confirms the adult activities between 17-year-old Gina and 69-year-old Dr. Camlett, and describes in detail what took place between them the night that they were found at his condo, including the money that was offered and paid to them. Tara says Jeffrey Camlett tried to get them to connect him with other young girls as well. She also describes his condo being filled with and a lot of weapons. In late July, 17-year-old Gina and Jeffrey Camlett connect again. They had continued to stay in contact through social media and private apps, and they make plans to meet up. He picks her up in his Corvette. He takes her back to his condo, where he allegedly showed her adult content, told her how great she would be in that industry, and told her that she could make a lot of money. We don't know how the conversation went, but from what I gathered, Dr. Camlett was selling Gina a life that she was intrigued by, making it sound like he could take care of her, he could give her all of these great things because he has so much money. He once stated that they could own the world together if they, quote, have chemistry. On that second meetup, Dr. Camlett agreed to pay Gina $600 again in return for adult activities, but allegedly only ended up paying her $400 because there were certain things that she did not want to do, and that made Dr. Camlett angry. Gina later told investigator Casanovas all about this in questioning, even showing him records of the text between her and Dr. Camlett. She also told him exactly how they met, what communication they had exchanged between the two of them, and described the night when Dr. Camlett handcuffed her to the bed and did unspeakable things to her. This is a quote from Gina, quote, I would tell my friends about him and about the weapons and the drugs. I would tell them that he has to do something more than just be a doctor, because why would a doctor have machine $20 million weapon collection in a condo? Casanova, the lead investigator on this case, also later spoke to Gina about Jeffrey Camlett's daughter. Camlett had a daughter who was called Gabby. Gabby had a history of running away and also a history of addiction. Very similar to Gina and around the same age as well. In 2017, Gabby was found deceased. Her body was found under a highway overpass, and her death was ruled an overdose, which I personally find suspicious, but we will come back to Gabby later. By November of that year, the investigation was still ongoing, but Gina was committed to a treatment facility on the west coast of Florida. Gina did great in there. She got clean. She turned 18. She returned home in March of 2023, expressing to her mom all about her intentions to keep up all the progress that she had made. But tragically, 3 months later, Gina would be found deceased, her body floating face down in Little River Canal. Her cause of death listed as undetermined. So what the happened? Let me tell you what we know. Days after Gina arrived back home, Dr. Camlett gets arrested at his condo on charges and 10 other felonies. But the judge believed that there was not enough evidence to hold him in jail, so he was released on a $92,000 bond and placed on house arrest with an ankle monitor. Meanwhile, Gina's mother is scared for her daughter's safety because no matter what kind of past she has, that is her baby and she wants her to be safe. She thought it might be a good idea for Gina's mental health to take a break from the investigation altogether and stop the questioning, stop the interviews, stop it all, just to get a break and a breath of fresh air. This is a quote from her mom about this. I said to her, don't do it, don't say anything to them. Our lives are in jeopardy here by talking to the police about someone like him. I told her that people with money and power don't get in trouble. But Gina was at this point now persistent to get Camlett behind bars. She wanted him to get the punishment that he deserved for what he had done, not only to her, but allegedly to a lot of other girls in his past. On June 4th of 2023, Gina traveled to South Beach. She texted her mom to check in around 5 p.m. At 10 p.m. that night, she was seen by the police walking with a man who looked to be unhoused. She spoke to officers and told them them that the man was her friend and that she was fine. That was the last time that Gina would ever be seen alive again. Gina had actually been living with her father at the time, so she wasn't seeing her mom every single day, but after 3 days of her mom not hearing back from her, on June 7th, Gina's mother contacts the state attorney's office, local hospitals, the medical examiner, and the police. By the next day, June 8th, Gina is officially filed missing person. That same day, around 10 in the morning, a deceased girl's body is found in the New River Canal. And this makes absolutely no sense to me. I don't know how, but somehow they did not identify the body. I don't know how or why, but it took 14 days for the police to inform Gina's mother that her daughter was deceased, even though her body had been found the day that she was reported missing. The police then opened a homicide investigation, but even then, Gina's mother was understandably so broken about the situation because not only had she lost her daughter, but now law enforcement wasn't really showing any effort to find out what happened to her. The detective stopped returning her calls, and Gina's mother began showing up to their office in person. She brought family pictures into their office one day, and in regards to that, she has said, quote, "I wanted to show them that she was not just a decomposed dead body in a canal. She was not just a girl that you think was a problem and a She was a young, manipulated, low self-esteem girl who unfortunately came into the path of a very bad person." It wasn't until Gina's mother took the investigation in her own hands that she found out that the cops had seen her on June 4th of 2023 around 10 p.m. with the unhoused man. Gina's mother found the unhoused man herself and begged for police to speak to him. They said they did, but said that he wasn't any help. Her mom said, quote, "I saw all of the pieces of trash flow by me in the water. I realized this is how my child left this world. This is how she was disposed of, like a piece of trash. All I know is she did not put herself in that canal." I think I forgot to say this as well, but the lead investigator, Casanovas, he resigned from the state attorney's office on May 10th of 2023, only 2 months after arresting Jeffrey Camlet. We don't really know if there was a reason for him leaving, but now he just works for the City of West Miami Police Department. This is literally making my heart beat fast, and I think I'm literally sweating because this just makes me so angry, and I literally don't get it. In March of 2024, nearly all the charges against Jeffrey Camlet were dropped. And I think it's because Gina, who would have been his primary witness, passed away just days before the trial was supposed to start. And I think that because the state attorney stated, quote, "The criminal case against Jeffrey Camlet was severely impacted by the death of one victim. The focus of the charges and the unwillingness of the second victim to continue her participation in the criminal court process." But in my opinion, that just makes the case bigger, because in my head, I think you have this awful guy who's being accused of X, Y, and Z, and now maybe potentially could be tied to a murder. Let's investigate him deeper. But instead, it's you have this awful guy who's being accused of X, Y, and Z. One of his main victims that we know about is no longer with us, so let's just forget about the case. What? Again, I know nothing about law. I'm not like telling anyone how to do their jobs, and I don't know the rules or regulations or whatever, but as part of a plea deal that he accepted, Jeffrey Camlet pled guilty to interference with the custody of a minor, and then he was released. He voluntarily surrendered his medical license. He paid some fines totaling to $750, and he served 1 day of probation. His weapons were all returned to him. However, his computers were kept and turned into the FBI. So Jeffrey Camlet thinks that he's off the hook. He goes to pick up his belongings, his weapons, etc., whatever he wanted to have back. He goes to pick them up, and that's when he realizes that he's not off the hook, because federal agents are now looking for him. Federal agents then start working on getting a new search warrant, and whatever charges come from that would be completely separate from anything that happened in the state court. On July 3rd of 2024, he was indicted, so charged with federal charges, facing 1 count of possession with intent to deliver a controlled substance. But then he was released again after paying his bond. Most recently, earlier this month in December, Camlet's attorneys presented the government with a 20-page draft motion to stop the search of his property and his belongings. The federal prosecutors acknowledged that there are significant legal issues with their case, and the judge agreed to postpone the trial. Prosecutors have to respond to the motion by January 16th. I've read that a lot of people believe that it's likely that the federal charges against Jeffrey Camlet will be dropped. Just to touch on Gabrielle, Jeffrey Camlet's daughter, who passed away. I just want to say this before I end the video. A girl who was a friend of Gabby's wrote an email that landed on Casanova's desk stating how dangerous Jeffrey Camlet could really be and her experience around him years ago when she was friends with Gabby and spent time with him. That is all I have on this case. Let me know what you guys think, but this one definitely made me angry. And I will say this again, we don't know what's going to happen with TikTok, but if TikTok does get banned, I will start posting these videos on my Instagram, so make sure that you're following me on Instagram. My Instagram is linked in my TikTok bio. I hope you guys are all having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day, make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.